limits, man. Whoa. Okay, calm down.
I mean, as someone who's an anti-war veteran, and you have to come back on because I could ask you there's so many more questions I have for you. But what are your thoughts on the war in Ukraine? Or I guess I should ask more specifically of what the United States is doing.
Sure. I mean, I view the war in Ukraine as a very dirty war. It's a war for fossil fuels and a larger part for overall commerce, as well as a megalomaniac battle between Washington, D.C., London, and Moscow. There's no good sides in the war in Ukraine. The only good side are the people who are there suffering. I think we've reached a real low point, and say that is really quite something to say about our ability to understand war overseas, where in this war, if you try and understand it prior to February 2022, you're deemed a heretic. You're deemed a Putin sympathizer. To bring up anything about, the coup in 2014, but also too, the other part, this idea that we are somehow keeping the war in Ukraine separate from all our other wars, that somehow these people on the American side who were responsible for this are the same people that are responsible for Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Libya, et cetera, right? That somehow that this war has to be kept separate from that. This is, I think, the war that the United States Army wanted, the United States Air Force wanted as well. The Navy wants a war with China, because how else do you justify $15 billion aircraft carriers, $15 billion submarines? The next generation of bombers, the B-21, are going to be $2 billion a piece. You need Russia and China as enemies to justify that. But, this war in Ukraine, in terms of what's the American involvement in that, like what are these grand strategists like that criminal John Bolton, who, I tweeted this earlier, but there's no prison deep and dark enough for a person like that. There really isn't. For the ruin that and destruction he's brought to tens of millions of people, there's nothing deep and dark enough for a man like that. But, this idea in Ukraine, as far as I understand it, is that one, it's a money pit. Andrew Coburn just wrote about this today. It's just not the $54 million, half of which is money that goes right to American military contractors. It's all the other weapon sales that are coming about because of this. The Germans, the Poles, the Finns, whoever, buying more F-35s because they're afraid of Russia now. I mean, so this is just a brilliant corporate giveaway. But the idea, though, is that the United States is gonna catch Russia in this trap in Ukraine. So you keep pushing. This is, look, trust me, the Russian invasion is illegal. It's a war crime. It is the invasion and occupation of a sovereign nation. But the Americans have been pushing, and Vladimir Putin's been pushing back. What do look, after the coup in 2014, he pushed back. He sent his people into eastern Ukraine. He sent his people into Crimea. And the brilliant folks in the White House and the Pentagon, the State Department, CIA said, oh, we just have to push harder. And this is the result. But the idea is that Russia will be trapped in Ukraine. Russia will exhaust itself there. That exhaustion will cause discontent, and the Russian government will fall. I think that's a fairy tale. I think it's the neoconservative wet dream of people like John Bolton. It will never occur. And I think what you're more than likely to have, I shouldn't say never, but what's more likely to occur, as we're sacrificing Ukrainians continually in an endless war that makes a ton of money, right? Because my friend Mike Ferner says, he always reminds me, even losing wars make money. So even if the Ukrainians are losing, money's still being made. But I think it's much more likely that the Putin government doesn't fall, but the Zelensky government falls. And this is what, going back a few months, all I would say about the war in Ukraine was two things. I have no idea how it's going to end, no idea, or what's going to happen. And the other part is the people responsible for this will never be held accountable. And this idea, this understanding that nobody should be not aware of, not cognizant of, this idea that war is a breeding ground of unintended consequences, right? That war is uncontrollable. And whether it be Vietnam and what happens in Cambodia, say, or Iraq or Afghanistan or in Syria with Al-Qaeda, then Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and then the Islamic State, these Frankenstein monsters that appear. So for me, what I think is more likely is the Zelensky government falls, something else comes up, and this becomes something no one ever thought it would be. And the ruin is massive. And of course, the danger over all this is because you have people calling for armed intervention by the Americans and by NATO, is that this escalates to the point where we are gone as a species. And that's not hyperbole. The danger of nuclear warfare is incredibly real because remember, during the Cold War, both sides had plans to use nuclear weapons early in the conflict. Not when they're losing, but early in the conflict during the Cold War, both sides plan to use nuclear weapons. Both sides now have, as they call, usable nuclear weapons. And there are both Americans and Russian generals who believe that you can fight and win a nuclear war. And of course, you have both Russian and American politicians who are more than happy to embrace such lunacy.